Today we're going to work on some multi-step percent problems involving commission and subtraction, but first let's get started with the do now. Solve both of these do now problems on your paper and enter your answers, and then we'll review how to solve. So our first do now problem is a current material problem. How to find the circumference of a circle. We learned a formula to find the circumference of any circle. It's 2 times pi times r. With geometry, always first write your formula. Now I'm going to plug in my numbers. So c equals 2 times pi is 3.14 times our radius. Now before I can just plug 28 in there, I need to realize that 28 is the diameter because the line goes all the way through the circle. A radius is only halfway from the center to the outside, so I need to divide 28 into 2, so my radius is going to be 14, half of the diameter. From here, I just multiply straight across, so 2 times 3.14 times 14 is going to give me a circumference of 87.92 meters. Remember to pause the video at any time if you need to fix any of your answers. All right, number 2 is a review percents problem we haven't done in a while. This is a percent of change problem. So many of you learned, let's start with our original price of $6.99. Now I see that the price is going up to $7.55 because that's what happens when we have tax, we pay extra money. I need to know the tax rate, which is the percent of increase. So whenever I do percent of change, I'm looking for the percent. What was the tax rate as a whole percent? So since I don't know the percent, I'm going to put x over 100. Our starting point was $6.99, so my original always goes on the bottom. Now I need to figure out that tax, that change. How much did it change when it went from $6.99 to $7.55? To get that, I subtract, and I'm going to get 56 cents. So the difference between $6.99 and $7.55 was an increase in 56 cents. From there, I'm going to cross multiply, so 6.99x equals 56. Divide both sides by 6.99, and it says round to the nearest whole percent. So the nearest whole percent is going to be 8%, which means my tax rate when she bought that mascara was 8%. The first type of percent problem we're going to focus on is commission. So fill in the blanks as we go through a review of commission. So commission is an amount of money paid to an employee for selling something. So most of the time electronic stores have commission. So the more you sell as an employee, the more money you get back for doing a good job and selling that product. Commission is also added to an employee's earnings. So an employee gets a certain amount of money per hour for working, but then in addition, for selling the merchandise and doing well, they also get extra money added on. So let's go through this first problem. Anaya earns $10.25 an hour working at Nordstrom plus 3% on all her sales. If she worked 22 hours last week and sold $2,700 of merchandise, how much did she make last week? So I see a couple things that I want to pick out. $10.25 is how much she earns every single hour. I also see the number 22 is how much she worked, how many hours. So those numbers are going to go together. I see that she gets 3%, that should say commission, on all of her sales. She sold $2,700. So those two numbers are going to also go together. So the first thing I need to do is first figure out how much money she gets paid. Because to review, if we go back up, commission is added to an employee's earnings. So first I need to figure out how much she earned. Well, she earns $10.25 for every hour, but she worked 22 hours. So I'm going to multiply her hourly rate, $10.25, by the number of hours worked, 22, and she gets $225.50 for working last week. Once I have how much she's earned, now let's go to the commission. She earns 3% on every sale. So that's going to be 3 over 100. Percent's always over 100. Since I don't know how much commission she actually earned, my X will go up top. And again, commission is on sales, and she sold $2,700 worth of merchandise, worth of items. So here I'm going to cross multiply. I get 100x equals 8,100. Divide both sides by x, or by 100, and we get x equals $81. So going back, this $81 is how much she earns in commission. But we want to know how much she makes for the entire week, which means our last step is to find her total. So I'm going to take how much she earned. This is like how much she would have in her paycheck. Going to add to that the extra commission, extra money she gets, and we get $306.50. So if the question is just asking a basic what is the commission, we just have to do a single proportion. If it's asking for the total amount somebody would make, you have to add commission to the total earnings. Our next percent focus with today is percents that involve subtraction within the problem. So first, some key words that are going to signal you to subtract. The first one is remaining. So write this down next to your first bullet point on your worksheet. Another word that means to subtract is the rest. If you're trying to find the rest of something, we need to subtract. Leftover, something very similar. If I had 10 pizzas before a party, 4 pizzas were eaten, that means the leftovers are 6. I would subtract. And another word is to withhold. If we withhold something, we're taking it away from the starting point. So let's look at this problem. Jaquan saved $1,200 last year. He spent $750 on a new computer, 20% of the remaining amount on a new bike, and the rest on Christmas presents. How much did he spend on presents? See a few key things. It says 20% of the remaining amount was on a new bike. So automatically, I'm going to be subtracting something. I also see another phrase, the rest. So he spends the remaining amount on a new bike, and then he spends the rest on presents. So right now, I'm thinking I'm going to have to subtract 2 times. So we're going to take this step by step. The first thing I need to do is just look at the computer price. The first thing he buys, do I have to solve for the price or do they give it to me? Here we're lucky, they tell us the computer is $750. It's not a percent, that's just how much it is. In the problem, we now have to figure out, for the bike, it's 20% of the remaining amount. So I need to take the total, $1,200, and subtract what he already spent on the computer, $750. So his remaining amount after he buys the computer is $450. Now I can solve for the bike price. It says the bike is 20%, So automatically I'm going to do 20 over 100. It's 20% of the remaining amount. I just found that the remaining amount was 450, so that goes on the bottom. And x goes on the top. So I'm going to cross multiply and get 100x equals 9,000. Divide both sides by 100, and I get x equals $90. So the bike price was $90. Lastly, it says the rest was on Christmas presents. So to get the rest, again, that means to subtract. He had $450 after that computer. We now know that he spent $90 on the bike, so I need to subtract that out. So he spent a total of $360 for presents. So we took it step by step, one item at a time, and each percent or subtraction word at a time. All right, this is our last one together. Try and think as we go through this, how is this subtraction problem different than the one we just did? Mr. and Mrs. Jenkins got married on Saturday. There were 125 guests. 28% of the guests had steak, 40% had salmon, and the rest had pasta. How many guests had the pasta dish? Did you figure it out yet? The biggest difference here is I see the rest, I see subtraction, but that is the only word or phrase, which tells me I'm only going to be subtracting once, and it looks like I'm only going to be subtracting at the very end, not in the middle. So here I have a couple different groups. I have people that had steak, I had people that had salmon, and I had people that had pasta. The first one, steak, 28% had steak. So it's going to be 28 over 100 equals x, I don't know the number, and there were 125 guests. So I'm going to cross multiply. I get 100x equals 3,500. Divide both sides by x, and I get x equals 35. So 35 guests had the steak. Now, I'm not subtracting next because the next thing it says is 40% had salmon. It doesn't say 40% of the remaining amount or 40% of the steak. It's 40% of those guests had salmon, which means that 40% or 40 over 100 is still of my total guests. There was nowhere right then that it signaled me to subtract. I'm going to use that 40% still of how many people were there. So I cross multiply and get 100x equals 5,000. Divide both sides by 100. And I get x equals 50 guests. So 50 people had the salmon. Now comes in that word that says the rest had pasta. Now I'm going to need to subtract. So I had 125 guests. I need to take away the amount of people had steak. I need to take away how many people had salmon, which means the rest of the people was 40 guests who had pasta. Be sure to pause and capture anything that you don't have on your paper before moving on to your independent practice. Use your notes in the example we just did to help you solve number 1. Complete all your work and then enter your answer. All right, so using this guide, when I'm dealing with commission, again, I first, since it's asking how much he made, not just in commission, but total on Saturday. His earnings, we don't need to calculate it They tell us he made $112 just on Saturday. Now we have commission. So he earns 3% commission on his sales. He sold $4,220. So now I need to calculate X for the commission. So I'm going to cross multiply, and I get 100X equals 12,660. Divide both sides by 100, and I get X equals $126.60. So again, this is how much he made in commission. This is extra money. So my last step is to add what he already made in his paycheck plus the extra money he gets for selling merchandise. And when I add it up, I get $238.60. Great job if you got that correct, and if you didn't, correct any errors before moving on. Again, use the examples that we did earlier to help you solve number 2. Work this one out and enter your answer. All right, so here is another commission problem, but this one's a little different because they don't give us how much he earned altogether. I see that he earned $9.50 per hour, but he didn't just work that 1 hour, he worked for 25 hours. So to figure out how much he earned just in his paycheck, I need to multiply the hourly rate by 25, and we get $237.50 is what he earned for working at Walmart. However, he gets 2% commission on his sales. Tells us he sells $4,500. So I'm going to create a proportion to solve for my commission. 2 over 100 equals X over 4,500. I'm going to cross multiply. 100X equals 9,000. Divide both sides by 100, and we get X equals $90. So again, this $90 is the commission. That's how much he earns on top of his earnings. So my last step is to add how much he earned plus the extra commission he receives, and we get $327.50 as his final total for last week. Work problem number 3 out, enter your answers, and then we'll go over it. All right, so I see Kayla has a total amount of $2,500. 65% went to her bills. 30% of what was left. So right now, I'm going to have to subtract something. So what was left after paying her bills was spent on food, and the rest was put into savings. So right now, I'm thinking I'm going to have to subtract twice. So let's go ahead, and we want to know how much was in her savings. So first, let's figure out her bills. She had 65% of what she made was spent on her bills. So I'm going to do 65 over 100 equals X over 2,500, which was what she made. Cross multiply. I get 100X equals 162,500. Divide by 100, and we get $1,625 was spent on her monthly bills. The second step, it says, is 30% of what was left after paying her bills. So that means I need to subtract. she had $2,500. But what was left, we need to take away what she spent on those bills, which is $875. Now I can figure out how much she spent on food, which was 30%, 30 over 100, out of $875, because it was 30% of what was left. What was left after her bills was $875. So cross multiply, 100x equals 26,250. Divide both sides by x, or both sides by 100, and we get x equals $262.50 for her food. Last and final step, the rest was put into savings. So after the bills, she had $875. She spent $262.50 on food, so the rest that was left over is $612.50. Be sure again, before moving on, you make any corrections, but great job if you worked this one through correctly. Solve problem number 4 and enter your answer. All right, so Naeem got $500 last week. 45% was for his car, 16% went towards the cell phone bill. The rest went towards food and clothes. I see one subtraction word, which tells me I'm just going to subtract one time, and it looks like it's going to be at the end. So first, let's figure out how much he spent on the car. So that's 45% out of what he got paid, $500. I'm going to cross multiply. So 100x equals 22,500. Divide both sides by x, or by 100, and I get x equals $225 for his car payment. Next is his cell phone bill. So it's 16% went towards his cell phone bill, but that's just 16% of what he got paid. It doesn't say 16% of the remaining, so I'm going to do 16% of what he got paid. Part of that paycheck, 16%, went for his cell phone bill. So cross multiply, I get 800x equals 8,000. Divide by 100, and I get x equals 80 for his cell phone bill. Third step, the rest went towards food and clothes. Food and clothes. So he started with 500. Take away what he spent on his car payment. So $275. Take away what he spent on his cell phone. So he has $195 left for food and clothes. All right, we've reached the last problem for today. So work this one out and enter your answer. All right, so here we have another commission problem. So the first thing I want to do is figure out how much she earned at the jewelry store. So she earns $9.75 per hour, but she worked 26 hours. So my first step is to figure out how much she earned. So take her hourly rate, multiply it by how many hours she worked. So she earned a total of $253.50 last week. She also earns, though, commission. So she earns 2.5% on her sales. How much did she sell? $1,000. $150. Commission is never on your earnings, it's always on the sales. Cross multiply, I get 100x equals 2,875. Divide both sides by 100, and we get x equals $28.75. So that's the commission, the extra money she gets, which means our last step is to find the total. How much she earns plus how much she receives in commission. So she has earned a total of $282.25. This was a lot of work today, but great job working through it. An awesome job if you got most of this correct and are now masters with commission and other percent problems.